All right, Chairman, thanks for your patience. I think we're ready.
Okay, good enough. Madam Secretary, would you please start the meeting?
Chair, meeting is now being recorded.
Thank you very much. Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And Fatima, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag of the United States of America,
and
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Madam Secretary, please do a roll call.
Commissioner Alvarez,
Here.
Commissioner Calderon,
Present.
Vice Chair Morrissey, Commissioner Pham,
Here.
Commissioner Ramos,
Present.
Commissioner Wu,
Here.
Chair McLaughlin.
Here.
Thank you, Chair. You have quorum.
Okay, thank you. I now invite the Commission Secretary to describe the way the public can access this virtual meeting. Madam Secretary, would you go ahead with that?
This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.santa-ana.crimegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at www.youtube.com/city-of-santa-ana-videos/live. If you'd like to provide a public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom, enter meeting ID 94567389593. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you have entered. Call 669-900-9128. Enter meeting ID 94567389593. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press *9 to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you're called upon, you must press *6 to unmute yourself. You will have 3 minutes to speak. I will alert you when your time is up.
Okay, before we go further, I neglected one thing. I'm Mark McLaughlin, I'm the chair, and I'm calling this regular meeting of the Planning Commissioner on June 28th, 2020 to order. Okay. We'll move to the consent calendar. We'll move to public comments on non-agenda items. Madam Secretary, does anyone wish to speak on a non-agenda item?
If anyone would like to comment on a non-agenda item, please dial *9. If you're calling in or select the hand icon if you're participating via Zoom. You will be called upon by either your name or last 4 digits of your phone number. I will wait a few seconds.
Thank you.
Chair, we do not have any speakers.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Having no speakers at this time for non-agenda items, we will close the public comments on non-agenda items and we'll move to the consent calendar. Moving on to the consent calendar, we do not have the minutes from the previous meeting. So at this point in time, what we will do is we'll have we'll vote on we'll have a first and a second on excused absence of Chair Marcy, Vice Chair Marcy.
I move.
Thank you, Alan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Calderon?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Miguel. We have a motion and a second. At this point in time, Madam Secretary, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Alvarez,
Here. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Vice Chair Morrissey, Commissioner Pham,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Commissioner Ramos?
Aye.
Okay, that was an aye?
Aye.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin.
Aye. Okay, with that, we'll close the consent calendar and move on to the business calendar. Before we get on to the business calendar, I'd like to go through some public hearing protocol. I will review the process that we will be following at this time. Staff will provide a presentation and answer questions from the commission. The public hearing will then be opened. The applicant will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 15 minutes. Members of the public will be given the opportunity to speak, limited to 3 minutes. The applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to comments made by the public, limited to 5 minutes. The public hearing will then be closed. Discussion will return to the commission for formal action taken to approve, conditionally approve, deny, or continue review of the application. Please consider the following suggestions when organizing your comments. Please state your name and address. State whether you support, oppose, or are neutral to the proposal. Your statement should include all pertinent facts within your knowledge. Any gossip, emotion, repetition, avoid that. A clear, concise, non-repetitive argument is most effective. This is now the time and place for the public hearing on item number 1, street naming, number 2021-01, for a segment of South Lion Street between East Edinger Avenue and East St. Andrew Place. Please note the decision on this matter is final unless appealed within 10 days by any interested individual or party. Before we begin, do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose with regards to this item? We'll go through the names. Commissioner Alderetti,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Calderon,
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Fan,
Nothing to disclose.
Commissioner Ramos,
No disclosures.
Commissioner Wu.
To my knowledge, nothing.
The only thing I'd like to consider, John, I'm a member of the Elks Club. Does that have any issue that we would have to deal with at this point in time? I think I can make a sound decision, but I did want to make sure that it was noted that I'm a member.
Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. It is certainly your discretion, but I don't believe a recusal is strictly necessary, no.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that, Ali, you're going to do a presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Can you hear me all right this evening?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item number 1 is street naming for 2021-01. This is a request by the City Council that was given to the city staff to request renaming of a segment of South Lion Street that is between Edinger Avenue and St. Andrew Place within Pacific Center to be renamed to Elk Lane. And the recommendation is that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving street naming number 2021-01 to change the name of a segment of South Lion Street between East Edinger Avenue and East St. Andrew Place within the Pacific Center development to South Elk Lane. This slide shows the location and surrounding zoning. It's a small segment of roadway, again, between Edinger and St. Andrew that's within the Pacific Center specific development area. 30 addresses would be affected. These are 5 property owners as well as their 25 tenants. For some background on this request and this segment, so Lion Street has applied to the roadway segment since at least the 1890s. It's named after Tustin pioneer George B. Lyon, who lived between 1806 and 1890. He was a settler and early pioneer of the area who made a lot of money after some bad railroad dealings and property busts that happened in the 1890s. And so this area, certain items are named after him, including the street segment here. The Elks Club has had a presence in Santa Ana since 1902. And since 1902, its headquarters have been at various locations in the city. These were originally at 310 North Sycamore Street here in downtown, served the local 794 for almost 60 years at that location. Then in the 1960s, the Elks purchased a site at 212 South Elk Lane. This is also known as 1660 East First Street. That's where it constructed a new 40,000 square foot building back in the 1960s. And that was the club that served the Elks Club for over 50 years. That site was recently sold for redevelopment to Wormer's Properties of San Diego, which is building the Elon mixed-use development that was considered and approved by this commission several years ago. In 2019, the Elks Club relocated to a new headquarters building, which is along this roadway segment that's up for renaming. It's constructed at 1751 South Lion Street. That club has been in operation continuously until today. So in its 119-year history, the Santa Ana Elks Club has had a strong community service presence in Santa Ana and Orange County. It's contributed to civic engagement efforts, charitable contributions, educational scholarships, and community service opportunities. According to the Elks Club website, the Elks Club spends $80 million annually in such forms of charitable contribution and community engagement. The proposed renaming that's before the commission tonight would affect only a small segment of South Lion Street. That is the segment that's highlighted before between Edinger and St. Andrew. The other portions of Lion Street would not be affected. They remain to be named as Lion Street. Exalted ruler Lisa Darmose of the local 794 initiated public outreach. We've communicated with her several times in the past couple of months. She and her group have initiated public outreach to affected property owners through mailers and in-person visits. And their goal was to identify any areas of concern and offer financial assistance to property owners that might have been affected by the proposed renaming and to update any affected records. So when considering a street naming or a public facilities naming, staff is required to analyze the request and in essence, make sure that it makes sense and doesn't create confusion and public safety issues. So in analyzing this particular request, the analysis and background research indicates, as indicated before, the South Elk Lane name is intended to commemorate the Santa Ana Elks Club, which has had a presence here in Santa Ana for over 119 years. The renaming is consistent with the past practice of naming the adjacent roadway after the Elks. This was the case at 212 South Elk Lane with the previous headquarters, and that was located between East First Street and East Chestnut Avenue by the Santa Ana Zoo. So that roadway will also remain as South Elk Lane. That's not going to get changed. But because there's no overlapping address numbers, there's no confusion, there's no public safety issues that would result from that. The renamed segment, lastly, will not pose any threat to public health, safety, or welfare, or creating confusion for motorists, emergency responders, other service providers. When this request first came through, as is the planning division's practice, we coordinated with Orange County Fire Authority, with our internal building department and other agencies that could be affected, and none identified any dangers or any confusion opportunities because, again, there's no repeating numbers for the addresses. This segment that's up for renaming is also distinctly landscaped and hardscaped. It's a completely different roadway segment. It's within Pacific Center, which is a specific development. And again, it's not going to have any overlapping numbers with Lion Street or other segments of Elk Lane. So when reviewing the project as well, we considered the California Environmental Quality Act and found that it's exempt from further review pursuant to the CEQA guidelines. And as a result, an environmental review will be filed for this project with the County of Orange. And lastly, there's no fiscal impact associated with this project. So based on this analysis and this background information, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving street naming number 2021-01 this evening. Be happy to answer any questions the commission might have, and we also have representatives from the Elks Club as well on the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Commissioner Alderete, do you have any questions of the presentation and staff?
I do. I was wondering, given all the sort of controversy that's gone on with renaming and naming of important people throughout the country, have we done any research to understand whether this individual participated in the Chinese Exclusion Act or owned slaves?
Commissioner Alderete, doing the research, we didn't find any sort of documentation on those topics for the Elks Club. The intent is to name the roadway after Elk Lane for the Elks Club, not after any one particular individual per se, but I'm sure representatives of the Elks Club could also provide any background information on that.
Sure, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Calderon?
Yeah, I just have one question. How soon would GPS platforms adopt this name change? So for example, like Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps, like how fast would that happen?
Thank you. Good question, Commissioner. Those changes happen fairly quickly. Our practice is to draft a letter with an exhibit to all affected agencies. There's about 20 of them or so that are responsible, like United States Post Office, all those different agencies. Google Maps, Apple Maps, these will tend to pick up these changes fairly quickly from my experience. Also, not to give too much away, but I'm also an editor and reviewer for Google on the side as a hobby. So whenever there's these changes in Santa Ana that affect local addressing, I just tend to go in and make the changes myself. So I don't anticipate any major delay in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Calderon. Commissioner Pham?
Yes, thank you, Ali. The changes in signage, and I know that there's a bus stop right on South Line Street right now. These changes, financially, would the Elks Club be responsible for all the changes in signage and whatever procedures that we have in place, or would it be the city's responsibility?
Thank you, Commissioner Pham. I did review this question earlier today with our Public Works agency. So the typical practice is that the requesting party or the source of the request in general offers the kind of financial resources needed for the city to carry out the changes. What they typically do, however, when it comes to street namings and street signs, is that the city points the applicants or the parties to a firm or a contracting firm that's on the city's short list, let's say, and that follows a template, and they will cover the costs themselves to execute the changes. In this case, the amount is not terribly high because there actually is a very limited number of signs that need to be changed. There's no traditional, sorry, my voice is giving out a little bit. There's no traditional ground mounted signs like you would see in a residential neighborhood. They're mostly the hanging signs from street lights and street poles. So a preliminary estimate came to about $12,000 to replace those per the city's template. And those new signs would actually have the city's logo on them as well, which is a new template for City of Santa Ana.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ramos?
I just have a question similar to that of Commissioner Alderete. So I did a quick Google search and I saying that one of the founders is a Charles Algernon Sidney Vivian. And I'm just wondering if anybody from the Elks Club can just speak more to who they were, just because I didn't see that in the staff report in this case. Thank you.
Okay, we can bring that up when we go to
Could you please enunciate, because I had trouble hearing what you were saying, Commissioner Ramos?
Yes, Commissioner Wu. My only question is similar to the question that was posed by Commissioner Alderete. So I did a quick search and I see that one of the founders of the Elks Club was Algernon Sidney Vivian. And I don't know too much about them. So I'm just wondering if any of the representatives from the Elks Club joining us today can speak more to who they were, just because I didn't see that history in the staff report and I'm curious.
We can bring that up when we have the discussion with respect to the public hearing with the applicants. So we'll do that then. Any other questions, Commissioner Ramos?
That's going to be it for me. Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Wu?
The other commissioner asked the question that I wanted to ask. I just want staff to clarify, this item is being placed on our agenda because the city council requested it. Did the city council hold any discussion, public discussion, before they handed it off to us, or what is the process?
The city council at a public meeting discussed this matter and directed to staff for working with the Elks Club to process the request.
Thank you.
Okay. I have no comments at this time. Moving on, Madam Secretary, have we received any written communication on this item?
We have not received written communication.
Thank you very much. With that, the public hearing is now open. Does anyone from the Elks Club wish to speak at this point in time? You have up to 15 minutes to speak. If you do, please identify yourself. Madam Secretary?
Lisa, but she's muted. I just said ask to unmute. Lisa, this is Ali with planning. If you wish to speak, you'll have to go ahead and unmute yourself on Zoom. I see there's other callers as well from the Elks Club. If you wish to speak, again, please unmute yourselves.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Do you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh,
Please
thank you.
identify yourself.
I will. My name is Bernie Dennis. I'm Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Orange County City of Santa Ana Elks. First of all, we'd like to thank you and the commission for the attention you've given our issue. We sincerely appreciate. If there's any questions, I can respond to you to clear up any matters that you may have, any questions or issues that you may have. I'd be more than glad to respond.
Is there anything else you'd like to say at this point in time?
No, we look forward to pursuing through the city council, hopefully getting our request approved, getting our street changed, and we'd sincerely like to have that done by Christmas.
Okay. All right, with that, I'll go back to Commissioner Ramos, and you had a question of the applicant.
Yes, that question again was, I was just wondering if any members from the Elk Club can provide more insight on who Mr. Charles Algernon Sidney Vivian was. I just didn't see that information on the staff report, and I'm curious. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. McLaughlin, would you clarify that for me?
I'll let Commissioner Ramos speak again. That it's her question. So go ahead, Commissioner
Yeah, thank
Ramos.
you. I'm just curious to learn more about the history of the organization and of its founder, Charles Algernon Sidney Vivian.
I'm terribly
So-
sorry, Commissioner. I must be
Bernie.
my computer.
All right, the question that's being asked is somewhat asked about the general origin of the Elks Club in Santa Ana and the founding fathers that were involved in that. And do you have any comments on that might be helpful?
No, actually, the Elks Club has been in Santa Ana, as we noted in our introduction, for over 100 years. We were principally, to begin with, a men's club. In the late 90s, we converted to allow women in our organization.
Out of curiosity, at your original location, that was adjacent to Beale Street, that was changed, and how long within your stay at Beale Street did you request the change? Was it immediately after the Elks Club relocated to Beale Street, or was it quite some time until you requested a change in the street's naming?
The change went on concurrently with the construction of the new lodge, new at that time.
That's it. Thank you very much.
I'd like to just for a moment, if we may, Min, can you kind of give us a little quick overview as to the timing of the Elks Club that was built on Lion Street and the fact that they phased out of the existing site on First Street when the redevelopment or the development process came in from Wormers. Could you give some insight on that might help from a timing point of view?
Sure.
Actually, if I may, I can defer to Ali, who has
That's fine.
a better understanding of the timing.
Ali?
Sure, yeah, thank you, Chairman. So basically, that structure was built in the 1960s. And as Bernie was sharing earlier, that roadway segment was almost immediately named to Elk Lane after that building. And then that remained in operation largely until the late 2010s. So I believe in 2018, 2019, that was when the Elon project was entitled by the Planning Commission. And at that point, the Elks had sold their property with the intent of finishing the new headquarters building down on South Lion Street.
Which they own and operate at this point in time.
And that is correct. It's been in operation for a bit now.
And I think the other side of it is that due to the pandemic situation where there was a large gap in the timing, the Elks Club has just really been on board at the new site for a couple of years. And now that we're out of the pandemic situation, timing is right to go change the name at this point in time or propose a name change at this point in time for the Lion Street. Is that correct, Ali?
The timing is originating from a city council request, so I'll reserve that opinion for the commission and the council.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Commissioner Wu, do you have any questions of the Elks Club?
Yes, Bernie, the current makeup of your officer and membership is not the same as it was 100 years ago, right? Because you have become more inclusive as residents of Santa Ana change.
That's correct. We probably pretty well duplicate the cross section of the community, the demographic of the community. We have a large percentage of Hispanics. We have a number of African Americans. We have a number of Asian people. We have a bit of just about everything.
And are your beers still $1?
I'm sorry?
Are your beers at the bar still $1?
Well, they're a little more than that, but then they're bigger too.
Okay, thank you. I hope that clears up the issue of the past versus what it is today.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, yeah, sure. That's, you can tell me what it is today. I think one of the things that I've learned, and maybe this is wrong, is up until 1973, the Elks Club had a white-only membership policy. Is there any truth to that? I mean, that's pretty recent, in my mind.
If I may, I came into the Elks in 1961, and there was certainly not a black-only membership restriction at that juncture, or certainly not one that I was aware of.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I can't say that what I read on the internet is true, so but that is good to know.
Okay. Any other comments, Commissioner Alderete?
No, I have none.
Commissioner Wu?
Well, internet information, we have to be careful to separate fact from fiction. And if you ask some of the members who are minorities, who are part of that organization, and I have no interest in the Elks or any of the other animal clubs. They're just part of the philanthropic field that support charities that I know. And I'm only interactive with them as people or someone has a meeting there or an event. But what I like to say is that any organization, even LULAC and GI Forum, have had controversies in the past, as Chinese American organizations and anyone else. But as we look at the organization today that is applying for this, I don't think we should hold a pass and condemn them for the actions in the past. You know, that's my own opinion.
Okay, thank you. All right. Bernie, thank you for your insight. We'll now open the comments to the phone for phone comments. Madam
Can I make
Secretary?
one last comment?
Yes?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
again, I'd like to thank you and like to thank the commission for your assistance. We sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies.
All right, Bernie, thank you.
And if I can make my comment, I just also want to thank Bernie for representing the Elks Club today and very graciously answering all of our questions. I hear what commissioners had to say, and understanding the historical context is very important to me. I'm also thankful for those that asked these questions and did some of that online research. And I think it's great to hear that while the organization at a national level, because I also saw that article on the New York Times actually, while the organization at a national level may have had a role, I'm glad to hear from Bernie himself that that wasn't being practiced at the local level here in Santa Ana. And I think that that information is very helpful for all of us to know, and also for the public viewing at home to understand what the history of the Elks Club has been in Santa Ana. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair McLaughlin, I also see that 2 hands are up, one from Lisa Darmose and then one from Norm Fisher.
Okay, Lisa, would you like to speak at this time?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Perfect. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for considering the change of name. The Elks have been serving our community, like we said, since 1902. We do tons of projects. We are looking forward to working with the city as well to build a park. And so we welcome your ability to consider this name change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Norm? Norm, would you like to speak?
Norm, if you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll come back to Norm if we can. Madam Secretary, do we have any other calls at this point in time?
Here. No, here.
If anyone would like to comment on a non.
It appears we do not have anybody else that wants to comment at this point in time.
No.
Okay, we'll come back to Norm. Norm Fisher. Norm Fisher, would you like to comment at this point in time? If so, please unmute.
I am. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, great. My name is Norm Fisher, and I have been an Elk for 25 years. And I just wanted to say that I was very involved in the building of the new lodge, and we have every intention of being there forever. We purchased this land, and we also have a tenant in our building with a 10-year lease. So we are committed to the long term, and we're committed to the long term for Santa Ana, and our representatives are charitable things that we do include supporting the veterans and scholarships for high school seniors and women's organizations. So we are very involved in the community, and we would appreciate, again, your taking this information and helping us to make the decision to change the name of Elk Lane in commemorating all the good things that we've done for the community. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. I appreciate the words. Madam Secretary, having no other public comments being made or phone comments that are being requested at this point in time, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for final questions and discussion. Commissioner Alderete, do you have any comments that you'd like to make at this point in time?
None beyond the ones I've already.
Okay, Commissioner Calderon,
I have none at this moment. Thank you.
Commissioner Fan.
So I just have one question. Hopefully I could ask Ali if it's commonplace for organizations to request for the change in the street names or adjacent to their buildings.
Thank you, Commissioner. Street naming applications are not terribly frequent because the city is mostly built out. But prior to this, the last street naming that we worked on, I believe, was a request to rename a portion of a roadway in the Auto Mall to commemorate Roger Penske. The roadway had previously been named after Dan Gurney, and then an application was submitted to rename it to Roger Penske Drive. And that would have run along several of the auto dealerships in the Santa Ana Auto Mall. That was also in a very self-contained environment in the Santa Ana Auto Mall and did not affect any large number of properties.
Thank you, Ali.
I think there was also one on Segerstrom too, Ali, was it not by the high school?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So prior to that, there was also Jaguar Way which was formerly called South Rate Street. So there was a stub of South Rate Street, I believe just north of Alton Avenue, that led into the high school there and the YMCA and everything. So because that stub was rather disconnected from the remainder of South Rate, they went ahead and there was an application submitted to rename that segment as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fan, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you. Thanks, Ali.
Okay, Commissioner Ramos,
No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
No question. Is it appropriate to call the question?
Yes, you can make a motion. You can make a motion at this point in time on this item if you choose.
I'd like to motion that we approve the motion.
Second.
So is that Eric?
Yep.
Second, okay, thank you. All right, with that, Madam Secretary, will you do a roll call vote on this item?
Commissioner Alderete,
Yes.
Commissioner Calderon,
Aye.
Vice Chair, Commissioner Fan,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramos,
Aye.
Commissioner Wu,
Yes.
Chair McLaughlin,
Aye. Okay, with that, we have a 6-0 vote with one absentee for Commissioner or Vice Chair Morrissey. At this point in time, we have concluded the business calendar and we're going to move on to the work study. The first item in the work study program is the Housing Information Update. Community Development Agency will provide a presentation. Does the commission have any questions at this point in time? Okay.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me start my video here. All right. So I'm going to try and time myself so that I've got a good 25 minutes with 5 minutes for questions here. So I'm hoping to end at around 6:41 now. I'm excited to present to you our, I'm going to share my screen. Hold on, sorry. Sorry here from beginning. Okay, and share screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm excited to present to you a work study on affordable housing. This work study was requested by Mr. Chairman, I think about two months ago. I do apologize for the delay. We are in the midst of two major projects pertaining to our emergency rental assistance program and our housing choice voucher program. But I've consolidated and updated our presentation for you today, building upon the presentation that we provided to the commission back, I believe, in 2019. So with that, I'm going to try and cover a lot of information very quickly and efficiently. So as you have questions, let's leave them to those last 5 minutes. I'll make sure that I end at 6:41 so that we're right there. We stay on time. Today we're going to cover the basics. What is affordable housing? Who needs it? Where is it? What's it really like? What does it look like? And how do we finance and develop it? I'm going to cover a lot of information very quickly again. So if you want to stop me, feel free to go ahead and stop me. I'm okay with that. But I'm going to try and leave that 5 minutes at the end here. So affordable housing, the basic fundamental framework of affordable housing is that a household doesn't pay more than 30% of their income on housing. That if they're paying more than 30% of their income, the housing is considered by the federal government, by the state government, by our local government as being unaffordable. Now, when we develop and finance, or when we attach covenants to affordable housing units in our community, the affordable housing becomes officially affordable housing when it has a recorded covenant on that property. It's on its title that restricts the rents at that property for the housing costs affordable to families at different income levels, not to exceed 30% of their household income. You have in our community, you have restricted affordable housing units. You also have something called naturally occurring affordable housing, where it's because of the private market rents that are being charged, it's naturally affordable to the families who may be residing in those units. But officially, affordable housing is rent restricted, income restricted, with covenants on the property, either covenants by the city or covenants by the state through the tax credit program that restrict the rent for this property. Now, who needs affordable housing? I'm going to go over a lot of data here, just very quickly, just high level data. So we have the largest, some of the largest percentages of families who rent in our household. As of 2019, 54% of households in Santa Ana were renters, higher than the percentages in California and in the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim metro area. You see this in a different visual relative to the SCAG region. We have 53.8% of our population who rents, and it is higher than the counties, than the cities that make up the SCAG region. We have families in our community who are severely cost burdened. You see here that in Santa Ana, families that were moderately or severely cost burdened in 2019 was higher than the Los Angeles, Long Beach metro area, and higher than that of the United States at 58.5%. Even though on the positive side, we did see a small decrease from 2014 to 2019 from 62.5% to 58.5%. We still have a substantial percentage of our population that is cost burdened. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their household income towards their rent. That would be moderately burdened, and severely burdened would be they're paying more than 50% of their monthly income towards their rent. This is a different visual on that same data. You see here how it breaks down by the total number of households. 17,000, over 17,358 households pay more than 50% of their share of income on housing. And you can see that the lower income housing lower income families in our community are the ones who are the most cost burdened, and they're paying a higher percentage of their monthly income towards their rent. You see another that same data in a different visual here. Showing the percent of families who pay more than 50% of their income on rent. And now we've looked at families who are cost burdened. We've looked at the percentage of renters. We see here that the total households in poverty in Santa Ana is 12.4%. Compared to 7.9% of households in the SCAG region. And then you see here the elderly households, a breakdown for elderly households in another visual. Obviously, homelessness is a constant topic of discussion. Affordable housing is a constant topic of discussion as well, but just providing some homeless data. And I would have liked to have shown you a visual that shows relative to the rest of Orange County. I should have added that into the next slide, but I could just tell you that the data shows that we have the highest concentration of homelessness in Santa Ana relative to any other city. I believe the next closest city is Anaheim with 300 to 400 less individuals as counted through the 2019 point in time count. Now, when you look at the growth in rent relative to median family income, you see a widening gap. You see it here. That again, the median rent from 2000 to 2019 grew by 91.8%, while the median family income grew by 57.4%. So a widening gap. The issue and need for affordable housing is getting greater over time. It's not getting better over time as our population increases, and obviously we have nowhere to grow, right? Except internally. Then here's that same data in a different visual. Again, rents increasing relative to income. You see some dramatic fluctuations relative to Orange County. You see things are generally a little more stable in terms of the cumulative percent change in rent relative to income. While you see in the Great Recession here, the dramatic increase in percentage of income, change in income for Santa Ana relative to just constantly increasing rents in the private market. And we have here, we pulled some housing, we pulled the most recent private market housing data, and it's broken out by zip code, the hourly wage that a household would need to earn to affordably rent a 2-bedroom unit based on the current rental rates from CoStar. And you see that 92705 is the most expensive zip code in our community versus 92701 is the most affordable. So, again, broken down, that is the hourly wage a household would need to earn to affordably rent a 2-bedroom unit in our community. And then you see, relative to poverty, but then you see overcrowding in our community with, substantial overcrowding relative to the rest of the country. You also see it relative to the rest of the SCAG region. I know this was recently in a discussion item for us regarding, regarding boarding houses, but you see here the data regarding overcrowding in our units in Santa Ana relative to the US and relative to the SCAG region. Well, let's jump into some numbers here. So the income limits are established annually by the federal government, by HUD, and based on the area median income for Orange County. So the median household income for Orange County is $106,700. Meanwhile, the median household income for Santa Ana is nearly half of that. It's $66,145. We provide here the current income limits for a 4-person household and the rent that would be affordable to that 4-person household. These are the tax credit rents that would be affordable to an extremely low income household, a very low income household, and a low income household in our community. And you see here again, if the median household income for Santa Ana is $66,145, the majority of our families in Santa Ana make less than the very low income limit for Orange County, which is $67,250. Where is affordable housing located in Santa Ana? We had created this map about 3 years ago when we created this presentation for the commission. So it's missing, I think, 2 or 3 projects. Actually, I think 3 or 4 projects here. But just that you have some idea and a visual on some of our projects here. I can, yeah. What does it look like? Our projects, through the tremendous leadership of our planning commission, of our planners and our planning department, as well as just our ability to select really good developers for our community. Our projects look like private market projects. You drive by them and you wouldn't even know that it's affordable housing. When you drive by the Santa Ana Station District, you have no idea that it's an affordable housing project serving low-income families. When you drive by our Orchard project, again, refurbished, rehabilitated hotel or motel, it was converted into 100% permanent supportive housing. This is the Harborside and Santa Ana collection, where 15% of these units are affordable to, I believe it's low-income families, I think, possibly moderate income families, but either way, 15% of the units at this project are affordable housing units. This is our Heroes Landing project. You'll see in the next couple days here a press release that the Heroes Landing project was selected as a project of the year, affordable housing project of the year, and received a Gold Nugget Award for it. A beautiful project. When you drive by it, would have no idea that it's 100% permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans. This is our Santa Ana Arts Collective project, another award-winning project for adaptive reuse. The project received an award through SCAG, as well as a Gold Nugget Award. And again, driving past this project, you would not realize unless you work for the city or you just knew that this is 100% affordable housing project. So how is it created? Well, the general is that nonprofit and for-profit developers develop affordable housing with financing from the city. Some projects don't require financing from the city. So let me give you several examples, right? So Heroes Landing was developed by a nonprofit affordable housing developer named Jamboree Housing Corporation, and they developed it with financing from the city. We provided them. I'm going to go over this in a couple slides, actually. Santa Ana Arts Collective was developed as a 100% affordable housing project by Meta Housing Corporation, who is a for-profit developer who develops affordable housing opportunities. They developed that project with substantial amount of financing from the city. If I remember correctly, I believe we allocated $7.8 million to that developer for the development of that Arts Collective. The project that you see off of First Street off of the 55. It's very, very large new development called Metro East Senior. It's 418 units of affordable housing. That project is actually a really good example of a project that didn't require any financing from the city. We didn't contribute any funding for the development of that project. And that project is 100% affordable housing being developed by a for-profit developer. Some for-profit developers also may provide affordable housing units as part of their projects to meet our housing opportunity ordinance or to meet state density bonus law in order to increase the density of their project. Again, going back to the framework and definition of affordable housing, it's when we record a covenant on that project that restricts the rents and and we use statewide 55 years. The affordable housing units are monitored every year by the city to ensure that the units remain rent restricted, remain income restricted. They're not only monitored by us, but they're also monitored by the tax credit allocation committee. And then we also inspect the units, 20% of the units, a sample, every 1 to 3 years. So how is it financed? Developers refer to us and our financing as, they call us the first funds in. So we're typically the first funds in a deal, but the largest source of funding for an affordable housing project comes through tax credits. And it either comes through highly competitive 9% tax credits or from 4% over-the-counter non-competitive tax-exempt bonds. The competitive tax credits are provided through the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, where applications are accepted twice a year, and developers have to go in there fully entitled, including CEQA, and have other sources of financing committed, particularly from the city, right, or the county, in order to be competitive for that source of financing. The 4% tax credits are considered over-the-counter because they're administered through the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, which is the same entity that provides bonds for like schools, right? The applications are accepted over the counter 9 times a year, and the projects don't have to be fully financed. Metro East Senior is a good example of a 4% non-competitive tax-exempt bond project, while Heroes Landing is a great example of a 9% competitive tax credit. This is just an example of the financing and what we refer to it as the developers working to secure their other sources of financing. We refer to it as their capital stack, right? So what sources of financing are going to make up their capital stack? So for the Orchard, I provided some information here on the timeline for the project. These projects take so long, and why you read about that in the media and why you hear about that so often is because of how complicated it is and how time-consuming it is for projects to secure their sources of financing in order to close and break ground. The financing for the Orchard included 4% tax credit bonds, $9.8 million in a senior loan, what we call a senior loan from City Community Capital, $1.2 million from the city, and as well as 72 project-based vouchers. And that's when you hear of permanent supportive housing units being developed, they're typically developed with project-based vouchers. And that's here where we discuss those project-based vouchers that are allocated from our Housing Choice Voucher Program. Just a side note, our Housing Choice Voucher Program is able to allocate up to 20% of our entire allocation of Section 8 vouchers to project-based vouchers to finance affordable housing developments. And we can also allocate up to an additional 10% if the projects are for special needs populations. And then you see here are the home funds that we use to finance that project as well. For our Heroes Landing project, the capital stack was a little bit different. The project was 100% permanent supportive housing for homeless veterans. The timeline was very lengthy. We started the relationship with this developer dating back to April 2017, and they completed construction in June 2020. So a little over 3 years to develop this project. The capital stack for this project was made up of roughly $500,000 in home program funds, 75 project-based vouchers, $12.9 million in tax credit equity, and then a loan from the county through the Cal HFA program for $2.9 million through their for something called the Mental Health Services Act funding, and then $750,000 from the Federal Home Loan Bank, $1.5 million in a private loan that was made through the Orange County Community Foundation, and then $500,000 through the Home Depot Foundation. This one, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 sources in their capital stack. Relative to other projects, that's pretty typical right there. That's not that's not complicated. It's not. It was sort of a complicated deal in order to lease up, because we were coordinating with the county and their healthcare agency. But in terms of financing this deal, that's typically what you see for affordable housing projects. And you see, just reiterated again, the city's funds that were contributed to make the project possible. Other projects in the pipeline, Community Development Partners is developing the Westview House. I can't remember the date that the Planning Commission approved the entitlements for this project, recommended for approval the entitlements for this project, but this is an 86-unit new construction project where 26 of the units are going to be funded through our mainstream program project-based vouchers layered on top of MHSA funds. You kind of heard a little bit of that in the Heroes Landing when I talked about project-based vouchers. And then you see in their capital stack already from the city, they've got 4 different sources of our inclusionary housing funds, our home program funds, our rental rehabilitation program funds, and then 26 project-based vouchers. They received an award of funding from the Orange County Housing Finance Trust of I believe it was, I forget the amount. I think it was $2.5 million. They also received an award of funds from the No Place Like Home program, and they'll probably close on their financing as a 4% tax credit deal. And then our Crossroads of Washington project. This project is actually one of the more complicated projects that we worked on, because it's being developed on our housing authority owned land that was transitioned from the redevelopment agency to the housing authority. And they have not only multiple sources of financing from us, including a 65-year ground lease on the land that they're developing the project on, but they also have 43 project-based vouchers and $2 million in home program funds from the county. Now, this is a 9% deal. It's a was a very competitive project for 9% tax credits. But just, to summarize, projects are financed in different ways, and different sources of financing make up their capital stack, whereas our funds are usually considered the first funds in a deal that make a deal possible. Typically, our standard process is to issue under our Affordable Housing Fund's policies and procedures that were adopted by City Council in March 2018. Our typical process is to issue an RFP for affordable housing development on or around July of each year, and then to make those funds available. And myself, Min or his designee from planning, and then Nabil from our Public Works Agency, and then our assistant city manager or any other additional staff from the city we include, review the proposals and select projects for funding from the city. And then we recommend that those funding allocations to City Council for approval. I'm going on 25 minutes here, but just real quick, We also have our Housing Choice Voucher Program. Our Housing Choice Voucher Program is our largest sources of funding to provide affordable housing through tenant-based vouchers in the private market. We receive approximately $38 million per year for our Housing Choice Voucher Program through HUD to administer Section 8 vouchers. And it's for very low-income families at 50% area median income. The last time we opened up the waiting list for the Section 8 program, we received 16,375 applications for our vouchers. And our annual turnover of vouchers is approximately 100 vouchers a year. So very, very long waiting list for our Section 8 voucher program. And then there's other tools that lead to affordable housing. I'm just going to flip through these here. Density bonus law leads to affordable housing units on site. You saw that with Mr. Mike Harris project in downtown Santa Ana. You also see that with First American project in downtown, where they executed a density bonus agreement that locked in recorded a covenant on the project for affordable units on site for 55 years. And then, of course, our housing opportunity ordinance. Since the adoption of the ordinance in 2011, 33 units have been developed on site, including 10 rental and 23 ownership units. Most all developers opt out of developing on site and pay the fee in lieu of developing the units on site. And then, of course, there's other tools and other laws that have been adopted in these most recent years to encourage and incentivize the development of affordable housing units on site. And I reference a couple here. And just our closing curtain here, in terms of our regional housing needs assessment progress, we are far exceeding our very low income and moderate income requirements under RHNA for the 2014 through 2021 cycle, and we have received A+ by an A+ score statewide. And we were one of only, the last time we received the report card, we were one of only 15 cities statewide to be meeting all of our RHNA requirements under all income levels, very low, moderate, and above moderate. And then how are we looking going into 2021 through 2029? We, based on the projects that we have in the pipeline, when you take those out, again, our pipeline projects, assuming that they all break ground, that they all close on their financing, break ground, and move forward, we will have already met our low income requirement. And we will have 192 very low income units additional to finance and develop. And we will have 543 units of moderate income housing remaining. So we're well on our way to meeting our 2021 through 2029 regional housing needs assessment progress. But I will refer you back to the data that shows the substantial need in our community for more affordable housing opportunities. With that, it is 30 minutes. Apologize for going a little bit over. Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Thank you, Judson. I appreciate that. And don't worry about extra time. I mean, you've got a lot to speak about, a lot to talk about, and it's good to know. I'm going to go through each commissioner, ask them if there are any questions at this point in time. Commissioner Alderete.
No questions. Thank you for the presentation. I was particularly interested in the part about the tax credits.
Commissioner Calderon.
I have no questions. Judson, thank you so much for the presentation. It's nice seeing you again.
Okay, Commissioner Pham.
Thank you for the presentation, Judson. In your opinion, what's the biggest kind of deterrent for developers to kind of approach more projects? It sounds like the city is doing everything that the city can to promote more housing, but in your opinion, what do you think is one of the deterrents?
You know, my opinion is actually self-reflective. We have adopted an approach where we make our funding available once through an RFP process with strict deadlines once a year, and developers have a short timeline window of time to respond. In the future, what I'm hoping to do is revise or propose an amendment to our Affordable Housing Fund's policies and procedures that make us more flexible, so that when a developer identifies a site that comes up for sale, that we can quickly form a committee, evaluate what funding we have available, and determine whether or not that's a proposal we want to move forward and recommend for funding. I don't see it as I don't see us losing sites as a result. But when you get the calls, right, of a developer who says, "Hey, this building just came up for sale," and I have to tell them, "Hey, you've got to wait to submit for city financing until we open up our RFP process." You always worry. You worry about those sites being lost, and I think it would give developers more flexibility to pursue sites aggressively while still following a transparent process, competitive process that is the backbone of our Affordable Housing Fund's policies and procedures.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ramos.
Yes, thank you, Chair McLaughlin, and thank you, Judson, for the wonderful presentation. I wanted to see if you could speak a little bit more about our 21 through 2029 RENA allocation. And I know the first slides you went through show the great need that exists in the city of Santa Ana. And you commented on how the units that are in the pipeline will go towards meeting that RENA allocation. But can you speak to how the city got that allocation and the city's disadvantaged community status, and how that affects how many units are allocated and whether that reflects the need to the best of your opinion?
Great question, actually. And Melanie, are you there? No.
Yes, I'm here, Judson. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Melanie, can you answer that question? I think
Sure.
you've got.
Sure, I'll try and help out on that. So the question was how we got our RENA allocation and some of the factors like disadvantaged communities, how that impacted things. So generally, a bigger conversation, a large number is given from the state to our area. And it's designated out, and there's a certain methodology that's put together through a very long process, public hearings, et cetera. And the process or the methodology that was adopted for SCAG, the region that we're involved in, looked at a couple of factors. One was that areas that are close to transit would have a higher percentage of RENA allocation, and those with higher employment areas concentration would also have a little higher distribution. And part of that is that it's the opportunity for the region to meet its greenhouse gas goals, its air quality, sustainability goals, et cetera. But as Commissioner was mentioning, there is also a factor that was put in place for cities like ourselves, and there's 5 other cities in Orange County that are considered disadvantaged communities. And in those cases, they actually hold down the numbers a bit, and they do not factor in as much the population and the transportation component. And so in essence, our numbers were actually held a little bit lower. I'm not sure if that helps.
Yeah, and I want to add to that because I reminded everybody of what the data shows in terms of the need in our community, and I want to help you understand what that looks like in real time, right? So first off, every morning when I get to the office, I receive at least 2 emails a day. Myself, not including my staff, at least 2 emails a day about the need for affordable housing of families who are in so many different situations, who explain their situations to me and pour their hearts out by email, and they are just pleading with and needing affordable housing opportunities. And then when we finance affordable housing opportunities in the community, and we talk about the different income levels that the project is going to serve, right? And you see them here: very low income, moderate income, and I want to show you. You see it. You see when we mentioned it here for Crossroads of Washington. I love this project because it's such a great project that owes so much of the credit and its structure to Commissioner Ramos through her leadership. But when we talk about the affordability levels, what that looks like is that we provided $6 million to develop the La Placita Cinco project. And we marketed their project as heavily as possible. I think we sent out 3 press releases. They marketed their project as widely as possible. And they ended up reaching out to me about 4 months later. The project is completely developed. And they reached out to me a couple months later and said, you know, here's all of our efforts to reach out to the local Santa Ana community, and we just can't find people that qualify for units at 60% AMI. These are affordable housing projects. So you would think if we have such a need, then our residents would qualify. But what we see in the data, what we also see in practice, is that unless we're developing and financing affordable housing for large families at extremely low income levels, then we're not adequately meeting the needs of our community, and families will continue to be cost burdened, will continue to be rent burdened, as we see in the data. And it's so you could it is easy. It would be relatively easy for someone to look at our RENA allocation in this period and this upcoming and say, well, the city doesn't need to provide any more affordable housing because we have met our RENA requirements. It's just not. That's not what the facts show. That's not what the need out there. The need in our community is. I would say it's much greater than what we even see in the data.
Thank you both Melanie and Judson for responding to my question. And I just really want to reiterate the last thing that Judson said in it. I don't know if it's possible to get the slide back on the screen where we have the RENA allocation breakdown by income level. But I just think it's really important for us as the Planning Commission to understand these numbers and what they represent and what they don't represent. Because we as a commission have oftentimes we're voting on whether or not affordable housing projects are moving forward in their process. And this is also the body that will see the housing opportunity ordinance and make a recommendation as it moves towards city council whenever that comes back this year. So I just want us to see what these numbers look like. I'm very happy that Melanie explained that because of our disadvantaged community designation, these numbers are lower than what they would otherwise have been based off how the state allocates these numbers. And if we look at the above moderate income category, we're going to be building a surplus of over 6,000 units based off what's currently in the pipeline. This doesn't represent everything else that's going to come in the next housing element cycle. So I just want us to really think about this and think about all of the context that Judson provided on the need in Santa Ana, so that we never get caught up in the idea that we've met our numbers at very low and low, because these numbers don't represent the need in Santa Ana. The need is much greater. So I just ask that we all remember that as we serve in this commission or in any other capacity in the city, where we can influence what will happen with affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alderetti.
Yeah, a question did occur to me when I heard Commissioner Ramos speak. The first thing is I'd love to receive a copy of the presentation that you made, because I don't think we had that ahead of time.
We can make it available to everybody on the commission.
Great. And then what is the status of the WHO, and how do you see it helping build and spur affordable housing in Santa Ana?
Thank you, Commissioner Alderetti. Actually, Min and I can provide the update together. Min?
The city council back in March formed the ad hoc committee on housing issue to discuss the WHO as well as other housing related issue. The committee consists of the mayor, Councilmember Fan, and Councilmember Lopez. They have been meeting with staff since March to discuss issues relating to housing. One of the recommendation or discussion has been relating to the WHO and whether or not any type of revision would be warranted. The committee has finalized their recommendation, at least on the WHO, and will be reporting back to the city council in July. Right now, it is tentatively scheduled for July 6th. But that may get continued, but as I mentioned, tentatively July 6th.
And then in response to your second question, let me give you a snapshot of what affordable housing funding we have had as a city over these last 10 years, right? So back when redevelopment was in place, this city had, I have the numbers somewhere, and I don't want to throw you off, but we had substantially more of funding for affordable housing than we do now on an annual basis through that tax increment revenue. And since then, and we've shared this widely with other cities who were considering housing opportunity ordinances, inclusionary ordinances in their community. Since then, the in lieu fees that we've generated through our housing opportunity ordinance have gone to supplant that loss of redevelopment agency funding, while relative to what we had before, right? So you see this major dip, and then you see inclusionary housing funds starting to supplant and replace that funding that we had before to fund amazing projects like the Santa Ana Station District was made possible through redevelopment agency funds. And then you also see that we've now exhausted our something called our Housing Successor Agency Fund balance. So let me give you an example. La Placita Cinco, right, was made possible through $4.7 million that were carried over from the redevelopment era. And we were able to use to finance that project. First Street Apartments, developed by AmCal a couple of years ago, is another example. But that source is now depleted. And so on an annual basis, our ongoing source of funding for affordable housing comes through our home program, which is $1.7 million a year, and any in lieu fees that we generate through the inclusionary ordinance. And so in terms of getting back to your question, right, what does the ordinance do to generate affordable housing? Well, those in lieu fees, when we collect those in lieu fees and we're able to leverage those in lieu fees with the various other sources of financing in a capital stack, then we're able to develop affordable housing funding opportunities similar to the funding that we had back in the redevelopment days. But without that source of funding, if you were to say, without the WHO, what source of funding do you have for affordable housing development? We have $1.7 million per year. And in order to finance kind of projects that we've been financing over these last couple of years with the inclusionary ordinance, it would take us a good 2 to 3 years to build up that fund high enough to actually make a nice project feasible.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wu.
We've been under a pandemic for the last 15 months. And if we look at one family, it's not like the nuclear Leave It to Beaver family. And where the income comes from may be pieced together to afford the housing for the very low income. When I visit the La Placita Cinco, it's a great project. I would love to live there if I could fit the income. I would like to get my children in there, and out of the house there. But hence is the problem that I see is that what projects are we doing to bring jobs to the people in the low end so that we could help increase their economics? Because if poverty is one of the things that is affecting their affordability to pay rent, we're already seeing in the neighborhoods speculators. I get calls from Arizona, Mississippi, all over wanting to buy my house. So it's a very speculative market that's also driving up housing costs. The city, contrary to some people, the city has been over the last 10 years increasing building affordable housing, and also that includes those at the low end. The problem is that we can't meet the entire need because we don't have the money. And we're also not being able to build the housing at the affordability of those that are very poor, because no one's looking out after them. No one's looking to provide jobs for them or their children. And since the pandemic, I don't know how many of the high school seniors have found jobs or their first job. How many of the first-time college students that graduated from Santa Ana College are able to get jobs? Has that changed the economy in these households? So if I was to look 10 years from now, the next 5 year I see really is a troublesome little place where housing prices and income wealth are going in opposite ends. So how do we survive in this period and plan to meet the need? And how do these families survive? I don't know, but it raises another kind of question when we argue about are we doing enough affordable housing and all that? Because we're just throwing a lot of money out there building houses, but the vacancy rate is troublesome as well. So unless we improve the base of income for the people that live here, that have lost jobs, that won't return because we're mechanizing, we're computerizing, the guy that shines shoes used to be able to take care of his family. The parking lot attendant, those jobs are gone. And they used to provide jobs for people. So we're eliminating jobs for people. And we give these incentives for these big box things. And the land uses is also changing. So I'm wondering if there's any advanced studies that is piecing all these kind of information together, not just looking at the past data in the last 10 years, but kind of looking towards the future of like what's happening to the land uses as private investors and other developers are looking at. Because I talk to them and I look at what they're looking and they're projecting for Santa Ana, what they have planned to do and the areas they do. It's a little different from the way we're looking at it. And sometimes they do meet when there is governmental money to entice them. Other times, you've been very good at attracting for-profit developers who have done very nice projects, who brought in nonprofit social services into their units on behalf of the residents of their units too. So, and that kind of coordination has been good, but I'm wondering if we're also thinking in the next 10 years, and we have another kind of crisis that we're not anticipating. I'm sorry for the long-winded question, but
Commissioner, maybe I can take a stab at it. You asked, I think, a very complex question that has no one single solution. It involves housing availability, it involves housing affordability, it involves job creation as well as opportunity to jobs and access to wages that are considered living wages. So these are areas of policies and areas of issues that, number one, is not localized here in Santa Ana, but is something that is experienced throughout California, as well as throughout the country. So it's not isolated to our city. In addition to that, we're not in a situation where we're in a vacuum. Our economy, our housing, our residents move in and out of our city, and we're impacted as a region. So to really want to get at the crux of your question on how to address housing issues and income equality issues, I believe that those two issues needs to be addressed, and it needs to be a discussion both at the state and at the federal level so that it can have a greater change and a greater impact to the national and state economy as a whole. And through those processes, hopefully that will trickle down and start to have an equalization effect, allowing for different regions to be able to experience parity and equality. So I don't mean to really get into a discussion that is beyond our scope here, but that's exactly what it is, these issues of income equality and housing.
And that was a question that I was looking for, and I thank you, because often we talk about the inequity, but the source of that inequity is sometime beyond our jurisdiction. And I like us to remember that we're doing what we can with what we have, okay? And this city has made a commitment in its plan to the very low income, and the moderate income. As your plan has shown. So I just want us to put it into perspective. There's still a great deal that needs to be done to address the inequity that we don't have any control over.
So to answer the second part of that question is that why we don't have control over the national and state economy, where we do plan ahead and where we're looking ahead on how to locally assist residents who are most impacted is through our general plan update, looking at the economy, looking at how do we better utilize our land to increase opportunity for housing. Also working through the housing element update, we not only address, as pointed out, what is required by the state and in terms of the RHNA allocation, but to realistically look at the issues that we have and try to come up with local strategy to help get our residents living here in Santa be housed at a price that they are able to afford. And so that's what we as a city will do and will continue to do, is look at policy that can help our residents and getting our residents better opportunity, local jobs, to housing opportunity through working with the various departments from the city, economic development, housing authority. We encourage local businesses to hire locally. We train our residents to get jobs locally. When we have new companies coming in, we work with those new companies to work directly with our WorkSource Center to draw from resources within our city, our residents. So that's an opportunity for us to help have local impact. In terms of housing affordability, again, we work with housing developers to create affordable housing opportunity in the city, and then working with those developers to house residents of Santa Ana instead of residents from elsewhere. So those are things that we can have local impact locally, and what we're doing locally in the general plan and the housing element to address those concerns. So I hope that kind of shows you the magnitude of the problem, and what at least locally we're doing to help alleviate some of those concerns.
And I think as we're opening up, we're finding there's a lot more service jobs, but the service job has not traditionally paid well. So hopefully our workers are being able to find other higher paying jobs. Yeah, I thank you for your answer. That's what I was looking for, just to remind us.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Jetson, again, your presentation was great. A lot of information. Very happy you were able to do that for us this evening. I just had a couple of quick questions or observations. One is, I think it's great to see that there's several projects that you talked about tonight that were basically adaptive reuse of, buildings. The art village, it used to be a bank and office building. And the interesting thing is that when we talk to developers about this, they normally, over the past 4 or 5 years, have talked about the fact that they can't pencil a profit with adaptive reuse in the, shall we say, above market value. But yet we've been able to do a couple of projects from the affordable housing side of the world that have been successful. Does that mean we're going to be looking at potentially more adaptive reuse projects? Or is there some finance formula that's being used at this point in time that makes adaptive reuse a good option?
Great question. Great question. So let me separate out motel conversions, right? So that's that. When you're referring to adaptive reuse, you're referring to the rehabilitation of the Santa Ana Arts Collective, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So the complicated factor with adaptive reuse projects is bringing those buildings up to code, up to modern day code, right?
Right.
So
Right.
Housing took the Arts Collective building, which used to be a former bank, and brought it up to code through some substantive engineering to make that project feasible. And what that translates to in terms of affordable housing finance is a whole lot of money. So let me give you an example, right? So the Santa Ana Arts Collective was 58 units, and we funded that project with $7.8 million. So 58 units, $7.8 million. The First Street Apartments across town, new construction project developed by AmCal. We allocated. I'm gonna lose my momentum here, but we allocated $8.8 million to that project. And I'll give the tiny La Placita Cinco. It was a new construction project, right? We allocated $6 million for that project. And First Street Apartments was 68 units, and 50% of those units, so 34 of the 68 units at First Street Apartments, were affordable to families, to extremely low-income families at 30% line. So it was much more expensive per unit to finance the Arts Collective relative to the new construction project at First Street Apartments or La Placita Cinco. Again, La Placita Cinco, we provided them with $6 million to develop 51 units of affordable housing. So it's that much more expensive, and because of it's that much more expensive and complicated to engineer those projects, that's the barrier. If they were simple, right? If they weren't, didn't have to bring these very, very old buildings into compliance with modern day codes, then they would be much more commonplace.
Well, I mean, that basically says that there's no magic sauce that's being used from the affordable side versus market value housing. Because I know that, the Harris facility, 888 on Main Street, he had to do a tremendous amount of earthquake retrofitting, which was not part of the original budget, so to speak, and that made it an expensive proposition, but he still went ahead with the whole thing. Anyway, I appreciate your analysis that you provided on that. The other question I had was, you made a comment, and I'm not sure the relevance of where it was, but you talked about there was 16,000 vouchers that were put in for a particular project. Could you explain that again a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So I gave the full presentation on affordable housing. Well, our largest source of affordable housing funding in the city is actually through our Section 8 voucher program.
Gotcha.
And I was referencing with that 16,000, I was referencing how many applicants we had to the voucher program back in 2015.
So it was 16,000.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about 16,000, how many of those were Santa Ana residents versus how many of those were residents outside of Santa Ana?
Great question. Thank you so much for asking that, actually, because it's an important clarification, and I'm glad you asked. So of those 16,000, 8,000 were Santa Ana residents.
Okay.
And we prioritized the Santa Ana residents, and then we conducted a lottery, a cutoff at 5,000. So we went from 16,000 total applicants, removed 8,000 because they were non-Santa Ana residents, and then reduced that down to 5,000 to create a waiting list back in 2015.
Okay, thank you on that. And that brings me to my next comment, and that is that, if there's the traditional funding and financing that's done from an affordable housing perspective, essentially puts in place a situation where how can we just build affordable housing in Santa Ana for Santa Ana only people? Because what I understand is that at this point in time, that process doesn't give us the ability to exclude surrounding areas. Under the normal affordable housing practice that we have to open it up to residents in other parts, other cities of Orange County.
You got it. I love that question too. So first off, to clarify, and I try and educate folks on this, we have a local preference on all of the projects that we finance with affordable housing. So what that preference means is that when a Santa Ana resident applies, they go straight to the top of the waiting list for that project as the next available vacant unit. That preference was adopted by City Council in March 2018. And for every single project that we have financed since then, we have had that recorded on the property in not only affordable housing covenants, but also density bonus agreements and things like that. But in order to create a perfectly pure Santa Ana only project for Santa Ana residents, we would only be able to do that with using one source of funds, our inclusionary housing funds. And those inclusionary housing funds, because they're local, wouldn't trigger the fair housing requirements that mean that prohibit a city from creating a mandatory local residency requirement. Those funds would be far insufficient to finance the entire project because, like we talked about in terms of the sources of funding for affordable housing in that capital stack, the largest source of funding is the tax credits, which then trigger the fair housing requirements.
So basically, bottom line is that the capital stack that you've talked about and you've elaborated on in great detail, if that was earmarked, if we earmarked the affordable housing for Santa Ana residents only, that capital stack disappears.
That capital stack disappears, and projects just they won't pencil out. They would never pencil out. You'd have to have like $15 million to $20 million in inclusionary housing funds just to make a 30 unit or 40 unit project fully restricted to Santa Ana residents.
Okay. I'll just go around the room one more time real quick. Commissioner Alderetti, any questions?
Nothing additional.
Okay, Commissioner Calderon.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fan.
No question. Thank you, Justin.
Commissioner Ramos?
And none at this time, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wu?
Thank you for the presentation, Justin. No question.
Okay, and again, you did a great job, Jetson. Thank you for coming back and doing this. It's a meaty subject, and thank you for taking the time to do that. And you did a great job. We appreciate your work. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay. Moving on, we'll move on to the second item for the Planning Commission tonight, and that's Planning Commission training. City Attorney's Office will provide a presentation. Mr. Funk, John, it's all yours. You got 10 minutes. No, take as much time as you'd like.
Well, good evening, Chair and Commissioners, and thank you in advance for your time tonight. Every now and then our office is asked to give an overview to the respective boards and commissions here at the city on things like their roles, history of the body, meeting protocols, and similar topics. And so it's my intention to do that this evening and give you some helpful information that I hope that you'll find valuable during your time as a commissioner. Some of which for those who've been on the commission may find familiar. For those who don't, certainly feel free to ask questions. I'm happy for this to be as interactive as possible. So again, thanks in advance for your time. If we can just pull up the presentation, I'd be grateful. Okay, thank you, Ali. So I just at least wanted to start with a few bullet points about the history of the Planning Commission, which I think we'll find on the next slide. The commission itself was established by our municipal code, section 2350, and as part of it's integrated into the city system of boards, commissions, and committees. And this is a system that provides a way for residents with specialized expertise like yourself or interest to participate in the city's decision-making process by advising the council on certain, often very specialized issues of the type that you see before the council or before the commission. We can go to the next slide. On the Planning Commission, there are 7 commissioners, all of whom are residents of the city, each appointed by the city council. Commissioners can't hold any paid office or employment within city government itself. The appointment, removal, and the terms are governed by the municipal code itself. I'm given the section there. Powers and duties. Substantively speaking, the Planning Commission has fairly broad responsibilities. They're also outlined in our municipal code, but I've excerpted a few of them here. Among them are review of the general plan, project approval, zoning code amendments, CUPs and variances, all of which we've seen before the commission in the last several months even. Any action by the Planning Commission is typically final unless it's appealed within 10 days. Those appeals are heard by the city council unless that appeal is from a ruling by the zoning administrator. And those appeals are heard by the Planning Commission itself. On that note, we have a zoning administrator hearing coming up itself on July 7th. Here I've just sketched out some attributes of what I think are effective commission members: balanced, level-headed, fair-minded, commitment to making the process fair for all, and ability to see strengths and weaknesses, and maybe most important, the faith in the future and the ability of the community to shape that future. I think all of those have been on display tonight, if you'll allow me to add. In terms of the commission's relationship with staff, as you know, city staff works very closely with the commission, but in general, they're accountable to the city manager. It's not generally within the commission's authority to direct the work of the staff. If you do have any recommendations, they could be shared with the council member who appointed you. The commission can even make a recommendation to the city council, but certainly briefings by staff are permissible. And I know that all of you work, from time to time with staff and closely with Executive Director Ty as well. Oh, we'll go to the next slide. The general format for business items, which the chair takes the commission through typically, I've just put here the high points. But first of all, the chair will announce the agenda item and clearly state the subject. The commission will hear any public comment if it's not already heard at the top of the agenda. Have a staff report, presentation thereof, and if any, we'll have a public hearing, just as we did tonight. After all of that, the chair typically makes a motion or invites a motion, announces the name of the member making the motion. A motion, as you all know, is a request that the commission take an action on a certain item. A motion requires a second, which is typically invited by the chair. The person who makes that second, whose name is also announced for the record. If there's no second on a motion, the motion cannot proceed. So a second is procedurally an important step. The chair will often restate the motion and preside over the discussion and debate by the members. Everyone does such a wonderful job here of respecting each other's time to speak. And so it's, I think, even without the chair recognizing them, but typically members are recognized and they speak one by one. After all is spoken, the chair repeats the motion. And especially if the discussion has been lengthy, it can be important for the chair to restate exactly what the motion is. And finally, there's a call, the question, as you sometimes hear it described. And the options are aye, yes, no, or abstain, if the member has chosen to abstain for certain reasons. The result of the vote is announced. The motion carries by affirmative vote of more than 1/2 of the members, which for the Planning Commission means 4. Otherwise, it does not carry or is not approved. That's just a general protocol for an action item before the Planning Commission. The consent calendar items proceed a bit differently. They're taken usually at the beginning of the meeting, and all items listed under the consent calendar are typically enacted without the need for discussion and by a single motion. A member, if he or she wishes, can do what is called pulling an item from the consent calendar if they want it removed from the summary action and targeted for some special discussion. But in general, the consent calendar items are moved in a summary fashion all at once, and they're not discussed separately unless a member wishes to, again, pull one for any reason. Sometimes items are pulled to highlight them. At times, a member may wish to explain why their vote may be no. There can be various reasons why items are pulled, but that is, any item that is pulled does not proceed on the consent calendar. A motion for reconsideration can be made by a member who voted with the majority on the first go around. The motion can only be made by a member on the prevailing side who has changed his or her view. It also requires a second and follows the ordinary process and cannot be further reconsidered. Motions can be amended, as we often see in proceedings. There may be a friendly amendment to a motion that requires the consent of the maker in order to proceed. Sometimes it's called a substitute motion. If the motion is amended before the commission, it proceeds as a substitute motion that is voted upon in place of the original motion. The bylaws, as you probably are all familiar with, govern the meeting conduct and procedures in general, including meeting times and other internal matters. All our city commissions and legislative bodies here at the city have bylaws. The latest version for the Planning Commission was approved in November of 2020. I know that you can get copies if you wish from the recording secretary. Just transitioning to the general state law that really is the cornerstone for all public meetings by agencies, and that is the Ralph Brown Act. The Ralph Brown Act, or what I'll refer to as the Brown Act, requires that all local government business be conducted in open and public meetings. That's the central tenet of the Brown Act, essentially that the business of the public be conducted in the public. That's why all our meetings are recorded, noticed, only agenda items are discussed, public comment is invited and even encouraged. Again, it's that notion that all the business of the public needs to be conducted in the presence of the public. The Brown Act applies to the governing body of any local agency, such as the city council, and all commissions and committees and boards that are created by a formal action of the city council, just like the planning commission. The one thing the Brown Act does not apply to, and I know that Executive Director Tai made reference to an ad hoc committee tonight. An ad hoc committee is a temporary committee created for a certain purpose. Typically, the Brown Act does not apply to proceedings of an ad hoc committee, provided that there are less than a quorum of the respective commission. So for example, if an ad hoc committee was created at the planning commission level and had 3 members, it would not be strictly subject to the Brown Act. There's good public policy behind the Brown Act. California, like so many other states, has concluded that there is to be more than gained and lost by conducting the public business in the open. It's really a foundation of value transparency, and really encourages trust by the public in government. You know, even if government behind closed doors can be viewed as more efficient, the perception is that it's unresponsive and untrustworthy. So things like the Brown Act go a long way to engender a high level of trust in government. So what is a meeting under the Brown Act? Certainly what we're doing tonight, it's a gathering of significantly, it's a gathering of a majority of the members to hear or discuss any item of planning commission business or potential planning commission business. It requires notice, an agenda, and a period for public comment, all of which were done tonight. Frequently or just recently, the agendas for the planning commission have been posted in even additional time or time beyond that required by the Brown Act. The Brown Act requires 72 hours notice, but the planning commission's agendas have been posted even in advance of that. Unless a majority gathering falls into one of the Brown Act's exceptions to the definition of a meeting, it will be considered a meeting. So stated differently, whenever a majority of you are conducting business or discussing an item of planning commission business or potential planning commission business, that is a meeting, and triggers all the requirements of the Brown Act. We can move to the thing. Face-to-face gatherings only. Typically, meetings are face-to-face gathering. In this era of the pandemic, they've been done virtually, as permitted by state law, but they can take place in other ways as well, through other communication mediums, through emails, through phone. And it's very important to be careful about, or very mindful to conduct city business outside of the context of a meeting, again, of a majority of the members of the commission. There are some exceptions to the Brown Act. That is the public requirement in meetings. The Brown Act does not apply to individual contacts between a member of the planning commission and any other person. Say, for example, if you were to phone another commissioner, or if you were to phone a staff member at the city, that is not considered a meeting subject to the Brown Act requirements. But it is possible to conduct a meeting in stages, so to speak. And I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. The Brown Act refers to this, or this is referred to as the concept of a serial meeting. And so just because a meeting isn't face-to-face doesn't mean it can't be a meeting. And the Brown Act prohibits any series of communications, directly or indirectly, that result in or the body taking action on an item of business that's within its subject matter jurisdiction. This is known as a collective concurrence. There's a couple different scenarios that are most common, and I refer to them on this slide. One is known as a daisy chain, and the other is a hub and spoke. With the daisy chain scenario, member A can contact member B can contact member C, until a quorum, at least 4, have discussed and taken action on an item. Again, that's a way of developing concurrence or taking action on an item outside the context of a face-to-face meeting. The other more common scenario is hub and spoke. It's referred to hub and spoke, where a member A sequentially contacts member B, C, and D and shares his or her ideas with the majority so that they've developed a concurrence among a majority of the members. Those two things essentially result in taking an action that ordinarily must be taken in the context of a properly noticed meeting. And so it's very important to be mindful when you're sharing your opinions and ideas with other members that you aren't actually taking an action on an item or seeking to develop the concurrence of at least a majority of the commission, either say by phone or email. The best way to do that is really just to refrain from discussing planning commission business outside of a properly noticed meeting, outside of the context that you have a quorum in a properly noticed meeting under the Brown Act. And that's the best way to avoid triggering a meeting when you're really not having one or you don't intend to have one. Again, members of the body can consult with city staff outside of the meeting, but both the staff and the members should be very careful not to disclose the comments or the position of any other member, because that also can facilitate a collective concurrence outside of a notice and open meeting. So if you share your opinion with someone else, say it's a commission member or a staff member, you should be very careful not to disclose that to anyone else, because along the way there can be a concurrence gained on that subject matter. So there are other exceptions to the Brown Act. That is the requirement of a noticed and open meeting. And certain things are not considered a meeting subject to the requirements of the Brown Act. And they're listed on this slide. Some of them include attendance at seminars and conferences open to the public, attendance at meetings of other legislative bodies or social or ceremonial occasions. But there's a caveat. If the majority of the commissioners are present at any one of these events, they cannot discuss any items of planning commission business or else the meeting results. So again, the emphasis is on a majority of members in a setting that is outside a notice and open meeting that are discussing an item of planning commission business. If the majority is doing that outside of a notice and open meeting, that can run afoul of the Brown Act. This is why I have some recommendations for email here. You should avoid sending emails to the whole commission. If necessary, provide information only and do not solicit a response. Be careful replying to emails and refrain from communicating your position. Do not reply to a majority of the commission, and think carefully before pressing send, especially when you're thinking about pressing send to all. Earlier, I spoke about notice and agenda requirements that are required by the Brown Act. The Brown Act requires at least 72 hours in advance for agendas to be posted in a place freely accessible to the public and on the city's website. For special meetings, which are typically convened to address one or two special topics, those agendas must be posted 24 hours in advance. Now, on each one of the agendas, they have to contain a brief general description of each item of business. It usually doesn't exceed 20 words. The rule of thumb is the description adequate enough to inform a member of the public to determine whether he or she would like to come and hear the proceedings or participate in those proceedings. It has to be rich enough in content, but not excessively wordy. It typically doesn't exceed 20 words. There is some exception to discuss things that are not on the agenda. Typically, the only items that may be discussed are those that appear on the agenda, but there are some exceptions under the Brown Act, and they're here. If there's an emergency situation, if there's a 2/3 vote that something arose after the agenda was published, and the need for action came to the attention of the body after the agenda was posted, if 2/3 of the commission feels that way, it can be discussed. Or if an item was continued from a meeting held within 5 days earlier. But typically the only matters this is a relatively rare exception, I might add. Typically the only matters that are discussed in a meeting are the ones that are on the agenda, unless you have one of these narrow exceptions. There's some other limited exceptions as well. Members may briefly respond to public comments. They can ask questions for clarification and provide reference to staff, just as you did tonight with Judson in his work study session. Members can report on their own activities. Members can request staff to report back on any matter. Members can request to place a matter on a future agenda sometimes. All these things can be done without being expressly listed on the agenda itself. Public participation is a bedrock of any meeting here at the city. The Brown Act requires 2 types of public comment period. As we saw tonight, one is general audience public comment, where the public can comment on any item that is within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. The other types of comments are those pertaining to certain agenda items. And the Planning Commission ordinarily features both, or at least calls for both. Closed sessions are not typically something we see at the Planning Commission, but it does refer to a meeting that can be conducted in private outside of the attendance of the public or the press. These exceptions are very narrow under the Brown Act. The circumstances under which the Brown Act permits closed sessions are quite limited. They usually have to do with pending or anticipated litigation, to confer with a real estate or a labor negotiator, or to consider personal matters. So in short, anything that might be sensitive or might prejudice the city's position in litigation. We typically don't see them at the Planning Commission level, but you do see them at the City Council level. How to enforce the Brown Act? It's funny, the Brown Act doesn't actually give a lot of express directions on how to enforce it, but most often, if a member of the public or another feels that there's been a violation, they can take certain actions to enforce it. Typically, they seek judicial intervention, a lawsuit, litigation, but only after making a written demand on the body and giving the body a chance to essentially a do-over, if you will, to correct the mistake or to correct any instance of non-compliance. Again, the act doesn't really tell us how to specify, or it doesn't really specify how to cure or correct a violation. But in general, if the city, and this happens very rarely here in all my years in Santa Ana, I've rarely seen it, but in general, if there is a Brown Act violation, the best method is just typically to rescind the action that is complained of and start over, or take an action to reaffirm it. Social media, just a brief word. At this point in time, you're probably very aware of the things on this screen that the internet never forgets. The perception is reality. Once you say it on social media or on the internet, you can't take it back. Mistakes get magnified. In other words, be very careful when you're using social media when it comes to city matters, and I'll talk about that in the next couple slides. The city itself's got a prime interest in expectation in deciding what is spoken on behalf of the city when it comes to social media sites controlled by the city. For other sites that aren't controlled by the city, if you're posting and speaking about matters affecting the city, if you identify yourself as a planning commissioner, you should clarify that the opinions expressed are your own and not the city's or the commission's itself. You can use social media to engage with the public, however. You can use it to answer questions, provide information to the public, or solicit information from the public. What you can't do is use social media to discuss among yourselves items of city business. That again gets very close to triggering the requirements of the meeting. And you can't, and the law does not permit members to respond directly to any other communication made by a fellow member on social media about city business. That brings us to the conclusion of the presentation. Again, enjoy your time as a planning commissioner while you provide a very valuable service to the city council. It's just my pleasure to be staff to the commission and to work with you all and city staff, and happy to answer any questions or comments you may have.
Great, John. Thank you very much. We'll go around. Commissioner Alderete, any questions with John? Commissioner Alderete?
No comments.
Commissioner Calderon?
No comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Fan?
Comments. Thank you, John.
Commissioner Ramos?
No comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu?
So if I go on social media and I make a statement, but I do not identify myself as a city commissioner, but I ask that people show up at a commission meeting, am I violating anything?
Where would you be posting that on your like a personal social media site, Commissioner?
Yeah,
Is that what
I'm
you're
a
talking
personal
about?
figure. Not that I want to. I'm asking a hypothetical question to clarify for the social media, and since this is recorded, I'm just wondering if I was to post something, I did not identify myself as a commissioner, but I asked people to show up at a meeting, am I violating anything? And that's a hypothetical question.
No, I understand. Thank you. No, thanks for your question. You certainly can do that. You certainly can encourage participation in civic proceedings and city meetings. Where you would run afoul of things is if you expressed or if you encourage people to take a certain position, or if you expressed a certain position yourself, if you were a commissioner. And I say that because it may, what it may do is disclose what you're thinking about an issue before it actually comes before the commission, and to preserve your ability to be fair-minded, or the perception that you're fair-minded and objective in a discussion. You generally want to avoid doing that. But if the point is just to encourage attendance at a city meeting or participation in a city meeting, that's fine.
So that you would have to have a call to action, right? Contact such and such a council member, or you would have to advise the public to call someone or to take an action.
Yes, I think though, if that intersects somehow with a certain position, then I think again it may compromise one's ability to appear fair-minded and objective if and when that subject matter comes before him or her.
Alan?
I'm sorry, did that answer your question, Commissioner Wu?
Yeah, I was just asking to clarify things, and because they covered this in the training for new commissioners.
Okay. Any other comments, Alan?
No, thank you very much, John.
Okay. John, thanks for the presentation. It was a good presentation. Just building on what Alan mentioned just now, one of the things that we've seen in the past has not necessarily been in the front end, but it's been in the back end, where at the end of the meeting, right, wrong, or indifferent what the results of the meeting were, a commissioner might turn around and say that they did not vote, or they did not do this, or make a negative comment as to the outcome of that particular item that was on the docket that had been majority passed by the commission. How is that treated, and is there a way to curb that kind of activity at this point in time?
Chairman Clark, thanks for the question. So if I understand correctly, the scenario is at the end of an action item or a business item before the body, a member may make a comment if he or she was on the losing side of it, or the side that didn't prevail, a comment about the matter that passed itself at the meeting.
No, they're making the comment after the fact on social media. Let's say that evening after the event, or the next day, they make a comment as to the outcome and how they may or may not have agreed with that outcome.
I think that's permissible for them to share information. As I said in the couple slides before, then if we can go back to that slide on social media, it might be helpful to put up here. I think it is, there you go. You can certainly, members can use social media to answer questions and provide information to the public and solicit information from the public. So, I mean, if that could typically fall under information provided to the public, there's no, there's not necessarily, I don't want to use the word, there's not a muzzle on someone from expressing his or her view in that regard. Again, to the extent, however, it may compromise or prejudice one's ability to be seen as fair and neutral and objective in the future, that could be a concern.
Okay, good. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And thank you again for the presentation.
Chairman Mark, I do have one more question for John.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Alan.
My big takeaway, John, would be fair to say that we are representative of the city. So whatever hat that I wear outside of the Planning Commission, I am representing the city if I discuss anything to deal with city business.
Well, you're representing the city. If you are indeed discussing a matter of city business, I think it can be important to identify yourself. A matter of commission business, that is, it's important to identify yourself as a commissioner. If it's something that you're posting on your website, I think there was the slide before. If you want to turn to that. If you are speaking about matters affecting the city and you identify yourself as a planning commissioner, I think it's important to note that those opinions you're expressing are your own and not the city's or the planning commission's. What you might be getting at, Commissioner Wu, is maybe just a higher level of sensitivity just because of the hat you wear as a planning commissioner. And I think generally that's prudent, certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Alan?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. And once again, John, thank you very much for your presentation. It was great. At this point, this concludes our work session, and we'll move on to final comments. Min, do you have any final comments at this point in time with regards to staff?
No, sir.
Okay. Short and sweet. Eric, any comments?
Just one. When we change a name or of a school or a street, from my perspective, we owe it to ourselves and those appointed to ask questions. So I think we should invite inspection. I was recently part of the group that renamed Bolt Law School at UC Berkeley to Berkeley Law School in 2020 because John Bolt was a proponent of the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was the nation's first law banning immigration by a specific group based solely on race or nationality. And while there was an organized opposition to the name change, given the good deeds that the family had done for the law school very recently, the school changed its name not to honor the legacy of John Bolt. And I'm not trying to equate that with the matter that we had before us tonight, but I do think that any sort of inspection, no matter how uncomfortable, should be taken. That's it.
Thanks, Eric. Bao.
No comments, but I did enjoy both presentations. I think I learned a lot.
Great. That's good. Commissioner Calderon.
Great presentation from everybody who went on today, and Commissioner Aldereta, thank you for bringing that up to our attention. When it comes to name changes, that's really important, especially in the political climate that we're in right now. It's very important that we do all of our due diligence and research, and also Commissioner Ramos for bringing up the housing questions. So yeah, thank you everybody, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week ahead and enjoy summer.
Okay, Commissioner Ramos.
Just like it has already been said, I want to thank staff for the extensive presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that in the future we can get more presentations like this, especially before we will vote on items where the knowledge would be helpful. So I thank you all for the presentations now, and I will see everybody in person at the next meeting. Have a good night.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wu.
Thank you for the presentation. I found it very helpful, and thank you, staff, for doing your due diligence on the issue and researching it. And I'll see you guys in person next month, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Just a few quick comments. Again, thank you to staff, Judson and to John, as far as their presentations, very helpful. And we have, over the past couple of years, run a number of work studies to give the commissioners insight on different subject matters, and we found them to be very successful, and we'll continue to do that. I also would like to say that our next regular scheduled meeting will be held on Monday, July 12th at 5:30 in chamber, and we look forward to that. And I'd like to just wish everybody a great 4th of July weekend, a safe 4th of July weekend. And we'll see you back on July 12th. And thank you. Oh, one more thing. Presentations, Judson's presentation and the commissioners' training, those will be available to each and every one of the commissioners. You'll take care of that?
Yes, sir.
All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is adjourned. We'll see you on July 12th. Thank you.